Okay, we'll call the workshop to order. We're going to have a review of the proposed draft of the Androscoggin County Charter, and Mr. Morrison will be giving that presentation.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I'm Charles Morrison. I'm a member of the Androscoggin County Charter Commission. Joining me this evening are my colleagues on the Charter Commission, Richard Gross of Turner, who's the chair, and Richard Gradmason, who represents District 3 Lewiston. Also joining us is County Commissioner Elaine Makas. What I handed out to you is what I think are the highlights of the charter. The three of us will try to answer your questions if you have any. I'm going to go over this relatively quickly, but I'm going to go through it so you understand what it is. The 2010 voters approved a charter commission and they elected charter commissioners. They're listed there. I told you who's here. 6 of us were elected. 3 were selected, were appointed to represent specific offices. The Randy Greenwood of Wales is a sitting county commissioner. He was elected by his compatriots or selected by his compatriots on the county commission. Larry Morrow was selected by them to represent towns. He's a selectman in Poland. And Garrett Mason was selected, Senator Garrett Mason of Lisbon was selected to represent the legislature. Interestingly enough, the enabling legislation says that no one person of those could come from the same town or from any of the towns from which people were elected. So you had to pick and choose who could actually serve on the Charter Commission itself. We started meeting in February of 2011, and we met pretty much twice a month, for the better part of a year. You've already received the final draft of the charter itself. I am going to highlight some of the things that are in there and then attempt to answer questions if you have any. We had a lot of goals, as we said, and I try to highlight some of those goals in these individual sections. First, we wanted to make sure that the county government could facilitate collaboration among governments, and that's what Section 2.4 does. We operated under the belief that governments working together can do better than they can do separately. One of the big changes recommended is the change in the county commission itself. Currently, there are 3 commissioners. We had an option of doing 3, 5, or 7. We chose 7, which provides the maximum amount of representation of individuals. The size of districts are smaller. That also enables us a little better representation of towns because they have their own districts. Some are not individual districts, but they're put together in districts. The city of Lewiston has a district all to itself. It shares a district with some towns. In fact, it shares 2 other districts with towns. The city of Auburn has a district by itself and shares a district with towns. And then towns have 2 districts that are just themselves. The salaries of county commissioners are set by the budget committee. Pretty strong feeling that there ought to be an independent body to set salaries. I can think of no body more independent than the county budget committee. And we'll talk about, you could have read about that, but it's selected with a very huge representation of municipal officials. Another big change is establishes a county administrative form of government. We went into it thinking that professional management of county government is a very big positive. A lot of towns have gone to professional management since the last time the county charter was proposed, which is 20 years ago. They proposed a county administrator then, but a lot of towns didn't have them. I think there probably was some suspicion of administrative form of government. I think there's less so now. We require that the board establish bylaws, which they don't currently have, within 180 days. As they do now, because it's required by state law, an independent audit is required. The sheriff, district attorney, judge of probate, and register of probate will continue to be elected separately. We couldn't do anything with that. That's state law. If state law would change, I would personally recommend those get revisited, because it doesn't make sense to have separately elected officials in my mind, but that was not a choice we had. It maintains the budget committee to review county finances, but in the last analysis, the budget authority is the county commission, as opposed to the budget committee as it exists now, and that's a little bit different. There are no change in partisan elections. State law does not permit that. One of the things we heard in public hearing was they wanted that there was a desire for a recall provision in the charter. So we put a recall provision in the charter for county commissioners, not all elected officials, but county commissioners. And then the catch-all at the end to review the charter every 20 years. It is, in a lot of ways, the proposed charter in 2012 is similar to the one that was proposed in 1991 and was narrowly defeated. In some ways, it's a little different. The size of the county commission is different. We worked very collaboratively. The 7 of us, while there were some differences, there were not many. And when there were differences, they weren't acrimonious. I'd be happy to answer questions.
I got a question. I basically see 3 changes here, going from 3 to 7.
Yep.
And currently, what do county commissioners make?
Say again?
What do county commissioners make per year now?
I don't know,
Elaine
$4,000.
can probably answer that.
What's your salary, Elaine? She doesn't know.
It's like $5,000, isn't it?
But the salaries would be,
Yeah, I understand. That would be by budget committee.
yeah, was set by the committee. We also thought that we hypothesized, but we didn't put it into law, that with the professional county administrator running the government, that the salaries of county commissioners would probably go down commensurately. Right now, the county commissioners run the county. And they are both administrative and legislative officials. And I suspect that'll be true, and their salaries will more reflect those salaries that our city councilors would currently have in Lewiston and Auburn, would be my guess.
Can I do 2 follow-ups?
Absolutely, go ahead.
So if we took 15,000 divided by 7, would that be a reasonable number?
I don't know. I mean, it's going to be up to the budget committee. I don't want to make that an election issue. I think the form of government is an election issue. The hypothesis about what officials will set for salaries going into the future, at least in my mind, is what those officials, get appointed to do. And that's why the separate body, there's no bigger watchdog body than the county budget committee, in my mind.
Okay. But you don't think it's going to be 5,000 times 7?
No, I don't believe it will be.
Okay, and then there are 2 other changes that I think are really minor, and I kind of like them. The recall and they're 20 years, which I think is very proactive. So that's all I have.
Councilor Kerr?
So you had public input on the recall. What about any public input on increase in the number of commissioners from 3 to 7?
Actually, there was the public input was to increase. Some said 5, some said 7. We didn't have anybody said keep it at 3.
Okay. Good.
Anyone else? I'd just like to say that for the last couple of weeks, I have heard about this, and they say keep it at 3. And I'm talking about, I have not heard anybody say anything positive about expanding it. They look at it as a government expansion. And a lot of them just look at it and say, what do we even need a county commission for? Okay? I'm just telling you what I hear as I go around every day. A lot of people are very upset about this expansion. They just cannot fathom why it has to be done. Other people point out, they said, the less people on a committee, you can come to a consensus more quickly. But that's the public comment that I get.
Thank you for that feedback. One of the things that we've talked about is how we take this out to the public in a way that gives them information of why we made the decisions we did. And frankly, we want to see if we can form a committee to support it. We became convinced that both the administrative form of government and the larger body will give better government.
My name is Richard Grandmason. I live in Lewiston. In response to you, Mr. Mayor, the dialogue we had was about giving the outlying towns more opportunity to have representation. The populations of Lewis and Auburn is the gorilla in the room, so to speak, in the county. And so what happens is right now, District 1 are all the small towns. District 2 and 3 are Lewiston and Auburn primarily. And so we've talked a lot about that. In fact, we played with numbers with 5, which would have been a lot easier for us to divide up. But we had in back of our minds a stronger representation throughout the county is what we were looking for.
And again, I'm not wasn't really paying attention to this because we have enough problems in Lewiston. But I'm just telling you what the people are constantly telling me as I'm having, all day long as I'm in these different places.
I really appreciate that.
That's Lewiston.
When you only talk to yourselves, you think everybody thinks the way you do. It's very dangerous thinking, as a matter of fact.
I used to agree that the smaller towns didn't have a strong representation until we've been going through this 911 debate for several years. And it showed me that small towns do have a voice, because clearly, if Lewis and Auburn were controlling it, that decision would have been made a long time ago. So I'm not convinced that the small towns, when they get together and band together, that they don't have the representation. But I think, so you're saying that there would be a representative for Lewiston, and then there'd be almost like a shared representative who would cover towns and cover parts of Lewiston, and same with Auburn.
Lewiston could actually end up with 3 representatives on the new county commission if it's approved, because Lewiston has a big part of 3 districts. Auburn has a pretty good sized part of 2, and then their 2 would be absolutely for towns. That's correct, right?
And Lewiston could potentially have 4.
I have a very small slice of 1, but that would, yeah.
Right. I mean, obviously, the representation would probably be more focused on the smaller town, but.
One of the things that we also talked about in moving it from 3 to a larger number, be it 5 or 7, is it's very difficult, if one person happens to be absent, 1-1 is not a good place to be. And 2 people is not a big, even in a 2-1 vote, is not a substantial body of knowledge on one side or another.
Can I just add something? Thank you. I'm Elaine Makas from Lewiston. As one of the 3, I also wanted to put in my 2 cents about why I think that we need a larger commission as well. We ran into a couple of situations in the past couple of years since I've been on the commission where 3 was a really unmanageable number. I know that one time we had bids on oil changes, and because one of my colleagues worked for one of the places that had put in a bid, the decision obviously had to be made by the other 2 commissioners, and as fate would have it, I was away one time, and the other person was away one time. It took us 6 weeks, I think, to choose among bids. It was very, very obvious choice because one bid was considerably better than the others. So 3 is a difficult number, and even though I understand that people don't want to expand government, I think that taking into consideration the fact that the 5 or 7, however many people are on the new commission, will be sharing the same pot of money for salaries, there's no greater expense to it. So it really is helpful to have a larger number.
Okay, thank you.
Question. Just out of curiosity, why do you need our input on this?
A little louder for me.
Why do you need our input on this? Isn't this a county thing?
We don't need your input. Amongst ourselves, we said we would take this to every community in the county. So this is just phase one.
This is information.
Yeah. It's for input, so you know. Your municipal officials, I've always thought municipal officials had a big stake in county government. You know you do, you pay the bill. Yeah. I was a municipal official and always resented it when the county did not consult. So we're doing that. We have a fairly strong representation of municipalities on the Charter Commission.
May I have a question? Yeah.
Councilor Saddlemeyer?
Chip, I was wondering if you could just explain a little bit more to me the budget process, the relationship between the budget committee and the board?
Yeah, let me get my notes on that. It is a little intricate process. Turn the page over, get in the right place, 5-5, right? The Budget Committee is a separate committee in county government. There's a Budget Committee now. The makeup of the Budget Committee in the new county government replicates the old in that it is very heavily represented by municipal government. You know, we agreed that that's a good process. If you guys have to pay the bill, and you do. They give you the bill, you have to put it in your budget. You can't argue about it. If you don't pay it, they take your homes. I find that something out of another century, and it really is. The Budget Committee's recommendation goes through the whole budget process. I mean, first the board, the administrator will put together the budget. He'll give it to the county board of commissioners. Board of Commissioners will then send it to the Budget Committee. Budget Committee will go over it and over it and over it as they do now, every line item. I've been through that process on a number of cases. With two Budget Committee members being from each district, one of which has to be a municipal official. The process then is that they can overturn, they send the budget back to the county board with their recommendation. The county board can overturn what they do. If they do, the Budget Committee by supermajority can overturn the county board of commissioners.
Okay.
We wanted to leave a check and balance in this thing. We wanted to leave some authority with the county budget committee, but not the complete authority that they have now. So they have less authority than they currently have, which is final authority in essence. We figure the county commission is elected, they ought to be able to vote the budget. But if by supermajority the budget committee doesn't agree with a line item, the budget committee prevails. So that's the process. It's a little convoluted, and it's kind of a walking between what there is now and what there might be sometime later in the future.
Great, thank you for that answer. And I have just one more comment,
Yes.
if I may, Mr. Mayor. So I haven't heard from any of my constituents about, any comments on any of this, but I just wanted to say, I guess, my thoughts with regards to increasing representation to 7 seats. What I'm hearing is not that that move was based on sort of an ideological drive to expand government for the sense of it, and I'm not saying that that claim has been made by anyone here tonight, but what I'm hearing is that this is a practical matter, and certainly on the committees that I've served on, if you only have 3 people, it can be difficult if someone can't make it, or just in general, in terms of having the different perspectives to look at an issue, having more than just 3 voices can be very important. So what I'm hearing tonight is not that this was done for the sake of it, but you've tried 3, and 3 is very difficult to manage the responsibilities you have with that number alone.
It was practical, it was also democracy. Currently, if you divide the county population by 3, as it is now, each district is about 35,000 people. If you divide it by 7, each district is about 16,000 people. People have more
Representation.
ability to get to their representative. More represents kind of a legislative district. It's actually still a little larger, almost twice the size of a state legislative district in population size. But we talked about the representation piece too. I think that's strong. I mean, democracy means people can touch their representatives, and in Maine, that's particularly true.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Would you like to make any other comments? No? We're all set? Oh,
And where does this go from here? What's the process going forward?
From, our process is going to be, we're going to take it to every town in the county. You're first. I'm going over to Auburn. I'm not going to do this tonight over in Auburn, but I'm going to ask them for a date. And then we're going to go to every little town to a selectmen's meeting, you know. I was going to get there, Richard. And Richard's going to go to a lot of town meetings. Bless him. I last went to town meetings when I tried to sell the trash plant, Auburn's trash plant, to about 16 other communities a gazillion years ago, and got brutalized in some towns about the big city taking over.
Yeah.
They only wish they could get their trash taken for that amount of money now. But it's a very democratic process. I mean, anybody who comes, the problem with town meetings is not as many people come as used to. You know, and that's the failure of the form of government, I think.
But you get more people at the town meeting than
You know, they're not going to come for the county, they're not coming for the county charter, I'll guarantee you that. You know, our public hearings were very underattended.
And after that, what happens?
Oh, I didn't finish the process.
That's
So
right.
we're going to go to the towns. Once we finish with the towns, we have one more public hearing that we're required to hold. We will hold that. We'll make a final recommendation on the charter, and if we hear some things we want to change, we actually found something I think they said today, it was one section conflicts a little bit with another. We'll make final changes. We'll set that for ballot in November, which will be, you know, big election, so everybody in the county is going to get a chance to vote on this.
So if as we go through this process, anybody in the council or in the community sees something, they want to let you know about it, how can they do that other than going to a public hearing?
They can call, email any one of us. You know, we'll have the public hearing, it'll be posted. You know, people don't like that, to come to that, so get a hold of any one of the people that are in this report, and we'd be happy to respond.
or they can communicate through Pat.
Or Pat Fournier, who's a, you know, county clerk.
County clerk?
You know, has handled our administrative duties for us very well.
Or we can call Elaine.
Pardon?
Or we can call Elaine.
Or they could call Elaine, or they could call Randy, or they could call, who's the new one?
Beth.
Thank you all for listening.
thank you.
Thank you.